to the University of Nottingham's Jubilee campus, who are hosting us today, and thank you to the Vice-Chancellor, Professor Jane Norman, for that. This is a campus that was opened in 1999 by Her Majesty the Queen. It now extends to 65 acres of exemplar brownfield regeneration. And I think as you get an opportunity to perhaps look around the site today, you'll see it's home to Nottingham University's Business School and the University of Nottingham's Innovation Park. Lots of innovation taking place here as well. I hope many of you will be able to take up the offer to visit the new Zero Carbon Innovation Centre after lunch and see for yourselves the East Midlands Investment Zone in action, engaging regional businesses and creating new net zero jobs to drive our regional economy. Now, we've got a really full agenda today, I'm pleased to say. Many of today's items provide full updates to the board on key areas of activity. Some of them are recommendations for decision, and whilst there are formal voting arrangements in place, as in previous meetings, we seek to move forward on a consensus basis wherever possible. Members of non-constituent councils and associate members on our board are obviously welcome to contribute to any of those discussions. This is a meeting that's being live streamed, so your attendance is accepted and you may appear on it. No known fire alarms are planned. We had that drill this morning. We are obviously seeking to get through this as much as possible. Just to outline for members of the board, we will be reconvening again for a presentation from the RSA on the Inclusive Growth Commission after lunch. Okay, so let's move on. We have a very packed agenda today. I'll start with item 1 and apologies, and I've received apologies from Associate Member David Williams, from Councillor Peatfield, who's been substituted by Councillor Carmel Swan. Apologies also from Councillor Lawton and from Councillor Khan. I think we have everyone else in place. Any declarations of interest? Yes, Councillor Hazelgrave. I'm now a fellow of the RSA. Brilliant, noted. I think my declaration on that's been made previously, and I would repeat the same. Item 3, public participation. We've got 2 questions that are being received from members of the public. Let me just see if they are... yes. Nigel Lee. Nigel, would you like to read your question?
The corporate plan includes, under the heading Net Zero Transition and Climate Resilience, a commitment to, this year, exploit EMCCA's leading position in fusion, advanced nuclear and hydrogen industries. But fusion almost certainly won't deliver any useful energy before 2050. Nuclear has proved to be not very climate resilient when it has to be turned off in times of drought. And the Climate Change Committee's 7th carbon budget advises that where electrification is an option, it is generally cheaper than CCS or hydrogen. The latter option should therefore generally be targeted at areas where electrification is impractical or not cost effective. Would it not make sense to put more emphasis on areas with a quicker and more certain return on investment, such as renewable energy and home insulation?
Thank you, Nigel, for your question. There is a need to identify and deliver activity at pace to support the transition to net zero. This transition is made up of many interlocking strands, which can be realised at different paces, depending on the resources we can access and the complexity involved in delivery. I want to position the East Midlands to maximise the opportunities of this transition, ensuring that we don't just meet our climate ambitions, but also use the opportunity to create an environment that allows businesses to thrive, creating secure, high-skilled jobs for local people. This is vital because the region has already significantly contributed to the decarbonisation of the energy system. Close to 20%, that's 7.2 gigawatts of all UK energy retirements since 2010 has taken place in the EMCCA area, largely due to the 7 historic coal-fired power stations along the Trent being decommissioned. We need to harness the opportunity our assets present to support the transition to a low-carbon future, to provide energy security for our region, for our businesses and for our homes. Ultimately, achieving the UK's net zero 2050 ambition means that we need to consider the full range of technologies that are available, or will be. No single technology provides a silver bullet. A long-term vision and a plan that takes a whole energy system approach is required, as ad hoc activity will ultimately be more costly and inefficient. To help inform us of our options and identify an efficient, cost-effective route to net zero, EMCCA are funding the largest local area energy plan with a digital twin in England. This will support a coordinated whole energy system approach and enable informed, data-led decision-making. We know that the low-carbon environmental goods and services sector in EMCCA, which includes nuclear and alternate fuels like hydrogen, was worth £6 billion in 2023-24 and is forecast to grow to £8.7 billion over the next 5 years and could generate up to 125,327 additional jobs between now and 2050. Approximately 20% of EMCCA's GBA is derived from energy-intensive manufacturing. This will need a mixture of increased electrification and hydrogen to decarbonise successfully. Our commitment to these industries is not just about energy production. It's about positioning the East Midlands as a leader in green growth, which includes the supply chain. Saying all of this, retrofit is a key strand of this long-term vision, as your question identifies. As such, one of the first financial commitments of EMCCA was a £9.8 million allocation of capital funding for the retrofit of 680 homes. This money was passed to our local authority partners to deliver and has actually over-delivered, with 842 homes across every part of the region benefiting from energy efficiency and low-carbon energy generation measures. We'll be doing much more of this work in the years to come. Do you have a supplementary, Nigel?
Yes, thank you for that answer, confirming that the local area energy plan will help identify an efficient, cost-effective route to net zero. Can the Mayor give us an assurance that if, for example, advanced nuclear is found to be not a cost-effective way of producing low-carbon energy, or if hydrogen is not a cost-effective way of storing and distributing low-carbon energy, they will not be part of the East Midlands Energy Plan?
We'll obviously take the results of the local area energy plan and consider all of the recommendations and detailed analysis that it brings forward so that we can decide on the best way and the most efficient way to take forward our energy plans for the future. Thank you. I don't think we've got Anne Robinson, who was the other public questioner, here with us today, so that question will be available on our website. Thank you for that. Moving on then to item 4, minutes of the last meeting. You're happy for the board to accept those minutes as a correct record of the meeting? Yeah. Great, thank you very much. Mayoral update. Well, I'd like to start by saying that obviously we are moving towards elections and the public always have a view about who they wish to serve going forward. But one thing I know for certain is that this is Councillor Simon Spencer's last board meeting. And I'd like to thank him for his time as Deputy Portfolio Lead for Investment. His has been an exemplary career in public service, and I hope, and I'm fairly confident, our paths will continue to cross as he embarks on the next phase of his life, and I wish him well, and I'm sure that the rest of the board will join me in that. This board meeting takes place nearly a year after the first EMCCA board meeting was convened on the 20th of March. I feel that I could look at any one of you in this room and we'd be able to reflect on just how much we've done in that time. We're all focused on ensuring that EMCCA and the space that we built together, very collaboratively I believe, can deliver a way in which the people of this region can see the benefits. So just a few of the things that I've invested my time in over the last month or so, and it is only a month since we last met. Given the increased uncertainty we're facing in the world, it was really important to me to show support to the Ukrainian people living in the region, and I spent some time on the 3rd anniversary of Russia's invasion at the Ukraine Cultural Centre in Nottingham, watching the film 1% of War, a really extraordinary film by Denis Christoph, outlining in really quite graphic terms the sacrifices made by the Ukrainian people for the love of their country. And we know that the last few weeks have been a really sobering reminder that war is not over. This brought particular poignancy then to the signing of the Armed Forces Covenant, which we did at EMCCA's headquarters at the end of February. I was really proud of the discussion we had on this at the last board, because I think it shows the region just how serious we are about these matters, and collectively how we can support our veterans. I've had a meeting with Emma Reynolds, the Economic Secretary to the Treasury. That was a meeting to help me get a sense of the Minister's priorities in the role, particularly around championing the strengths of the financial services, which we know, even in this city, are significant important employers. We had a drop-in for members of Parliament in the region around the Inclusive Growth Commission, and I was joined by Andy Haldane, the Commission's chair. Again, very important that we bring the perspectives of all our members of Parliament into the Commission's discussions, and I was pleased that we were able to get the vast majority of the region's MPs to attend. I also held a meeting with the Deputy Mayor and Derby's MPs and stakeholders about GBR headquarters, which, as you will know, is determined to be in Derby, and the elected politicians of the area share a common view that this needs to be a substantial headquarters, not just a civil service hub. And we look forward to working constructively with DfT to ensure that we bring this about. I was pleased to join the Coalfields Regeneration Trust at their East Midlands 25th anniversary event in South Normanton. Their painstaking work of economic renewal, working with communities, instead of just simply doing to them. It's a real collaboration there. And inclusive growth in action. And I'm keen to learn from them the work that we might be doing in the next phases of the Inclusive Growth Commission. And at the same day, from one part of the region across to Buxton Crescent Heritage Trust, enjoying the work that they've done to turn that crescent into an inclusive local heritage attraction, and really understand some of the challenges that they face in ensuring that that's a sustainable heritage attraction. And finally, this weekend and last week, I really enjoyed participating in various events to celebrate International Women's Day and to highlight the one that the Chief Executive and I arranged to attend at Nottingham College's Construction Skills Centre. Fantastic, you will have seen quite a bit of media over the weekend on that as well. Really encouraging women to get into the construction industry, which is fantastic, not just for that equality, but also to meet the skills needs that they have. And I enjoyed having a little go at bricklaying as well. So a busy month and no doubt busy times ahead. Any questions on the mayoral update? If not, we'll move on. Thank you. To the item 6 and the corporate plan, I'm going to invite our Chief Executive, Amy Harhoff, to present the report on our corporate plan.
Thank you, Mayor Clare, and good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to present the first corporate plan of the East Midlands Combined Authority. It's an honour, I think, for both Mayor Clare as the first elected Mayor of the region and for myself as the first permanent Chief Executive of EMCCA to introduce this item today. EMCCA is one of the newest combined authorities in the country, as we know, but we are also one of the largest. And although there are many other combined authorities planned across the country, we will remain one of the largest areas. And our experience and our baseline is different due to our context, but we have made major progress over the last year to build as an organisation. We are at the heart of the nation with 2.3 million people living within our boundaries, with 1 million jobs offered by our businesses, 50 billion gross value added in the EMCCA region. We are highly connected with scale, with opportunity and exciting investable propositions. And so the purpose of this plan is to set out the collective regional agenda for the year ahead, harnessing the ambitions and priorities of the Mayor and the EMCCA board with the aim to deliver stronger and better outcomes for our region. The one-year plan will focus on the delivery of 2025-2026 for our almost £400 million investment programme. But the plan also focuses on the actions that EMCCA can take as a partnership to convene, to coordinate and to centre the region, working with partners as a system leader to make cogent our resources and our experience to do more for our communities. And together we will work at pace whilst bringing people with us. We will work thoughtfully to communicate and collaborate so that our plans, strategies and investments are genuinely inclusive in design and in delivery. And we will work through our Inclusive Growth Commission and single assessment framework to ensure that we are genuinely groundbreaking in our approach to ensuring the maximum reach and benefits of our investments. The plan sets out how we will work within our established values as EMCCA, that we are human, that we work together, that we lift our region and we deliver impact. The corporate plan itself focuses on 9 integrated chapters that seek to establish the high-level principles and actions to make our region stronger, building on the opportunities and acknowledging the challenges and the economic context that we have in our region. The themes cover strategy, business growth and innovation, skills and employment, net zero and climate resilience, transport and digital, housing and regeneration, spatial development, farming and rural affairs, and partnerships. These thematic areas are wide-reaching and all are supported and will be supported by a series of delivery plans and emerging and supporting strategies, and the corporate plan seeks to set a high-level framework to support those. As I close my presentation to the board, I would also just like to pause and reflect on the many achievements of the last 12 months of EMCCA, and in doing so acknowledge that this has been a team effort from within the room, from everyone in this room and beyond has played a significant role to make those achievements happen. From our well-run election to our appointment of the first permanent chief executive, to securing £160 million of committed investment to our investment zone of the region, and being the only inland area nationally that has both an investment zone and a free port, putting us on that national and indeed global stage. We'll see today the proposals to support over £16 million of investment into brownfield housing funds, and also on the agenda today we will seek support for the business cases for some of our pump priming investment for some of our major sites across the region. We've also secured plans to deliver 29 million of UK SPF, and we've agreed a pioneering approach to how we will do inclusive growth the EMCCA way. And in doing so, where I think that will place us is in a position nationally not to be judged on our age, but to be judged on our maturity as a region, so that we are able to pursue some of the really important national ambitions, such as progressing with a single settlement so that EMCCA can make its decisions across its whole investment programme, to become the home for national pilots and innovation, and as Mayor Clare has already set out, to see significant relocations of the civil service, such as those already committed for Great British Rail in Derby. Chair, that concludes my report, and I'm very happy to take any questions on the plan.
Thank you, Amy. Questions or comments on the corporate plan? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of things I just wanted to pick up. It's great we've got a corporate plan. There's a first iteration, and I fully understand that. What is the intention to give a sort of a structure to the next 3 years, next 5 years in a corporate planning way? So I think that would be sort of able to crystallise what our vision is, and that brings me to my second point. There is a sort of a vision, and sorry, I've just lost the page. a vision, purpose and vision section in there. We've got 3 nice big photographs, very little text. So the vision perhaps just needs a little bit more articulation for the future. And looking through the other pages in here, it feels great in the sense that it sets out what we want to achieve in the very near future, it seems. So what's the bigger ambition? What will this region look like in 10 years, 20 years after implementing line authorities had its impact on the region? And I just wonder if we should perhaps build that in for future iterations as well.
Thank you. We'll take a number of comments and then come back. Yes, Kath.
Thank you, welcome very much that we've got a document. And the bit that I think is really powerful is looking at the spatial elements and then actually almost seeing everything laid on top of those spatial elements. That would be the only thing that I would pull out a little bit more, because I think it's easy to go and talk through those spatial environments, those spatial constructs, and then see where we can see investment and where we can see the growth and the inclusive growth. So I really welcome that piece, and I thought it brought to life exactly what we're trying to achieve. So great document, but I think that seeing it through the lens of I suppose the whole of the structure of the East Midlands was really powerful.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Do you want to come back on?
Yeah, I think, thank you very much, Councillor Lewis and Kath, for the question. I think you're absolutely right. As I said, EMCCA is evolving, and I think we've got some big pieces this year, particularly the Inclusive Growth Commission, the spatial frameworks that I think will allow us in future iterations to articulate in the corporate plan the longer term vision, ambition and the specifics alongside those bigger documents that will do the same. So I think that's a really good point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. In which case, you're happy to approve the corporate plan? Thank you very much. We move on then to the local growth plan economic assessment and ask Damien Dacey to lead.
Great, thank you, Mayor, and good morning, Board. I hope you're all really well. So to provide a bit of a link, the first substantive chapter of the delivery priorities in the corporate plan talks about the development regional strategy as Amy's just set out, and the first 2 or 3 commitments there refer to some of the work that the papers set out. So last September the Board commissioned a programme of regional strategy development, the first 3 components of which were to set up an Inclusive Growth Commission, prepare a local growth plan, and also to do some early work in terms of visioning around the spatial priorities for the region that would, over the medium term, develop into a spatial development strategy of sorts, depending on the direction of travel on strategic planning policy nationally. So what the Board has in front of it today is a bit of a staging post. Where has that work got to? What does some of the content look like? But of course the work is nowhere near finished and will be ongoing, particularly into September, as the Inclusive Growth Commission publishes its final report, as we prepare to publish our local growth plan alongside other combined authorities, and of course as we make further development work on the spatial visioning. So there's 3 recommendations for the Board. The first is that the Board note the ongoing work on the Inclusive Growth Commission. Later on today, its chair, Andy Haldane, will be giving a presentation on the interim findings to the Board in advance of a publication of the interim report in the coming days. And as I've already said, the Inclusive Growth Commission is intending to conclude its work following a lot of engagement that's done already and will be doing over the coming months in September time. And that really potentially speaks in some ways to Councillor Lewis's point about that sort of long-term plan and vision for the region. It's intended to provide a bit more of a framework for how the Board can really engage with that question. The second recommendation really just asks the Board to note the direction of travel and to endorse as a sort of underlying piece of evidence the work that's been done to date on the local growth plan. So that's work that my team have been undertaking very much in partnership with local authorities and obviously wider system partners in the region. Annex A is effectively an economic assessment, looking at the strengths of the economy, starting to look at some of the areas where growth may be coming from. And the second part of it is the work that my colleague Ken has been engaged heavily on, which is this piece around the spatial priorities and really having a look at where some of those spatial priorities for investment may go. So again, the board is asked to endorse that and as a sort of piece of direction, or as a piece of the direction of travel for the work. Obviously, this work is ongoing heavily over the coming months. Again, working back from that September moment where it comes together with the work of the Commission. Just note within the local growth plan economic assessment, it does start to point to some of the choices that it will be for the board, and of course wider partners in the system to engage with about where to focus and how to focus. The work around the regional economic strategy as set out in the local growth plan, the board will note, although David is not here today, but last week the Business Advisory Board engaged in a pretty extensive workshop on some of those choices and will continue to do so. It may be that the board in one of its in-person development sessions also wishes to take a workshop and to work through some of those choices in the next phase of this. The other thing I would just note is that our engagement with the Department of Business and Trade on the emerging industrial strategy is clearly ongoing. We've got meetings next week to make sure that what we are doing is well aligned to emerging government thinking about how to grow the economy nationally, and particularly what that looks like from a place-based perspective in the East Midlands, where we know we have a significant contribution to make to the National Growth Mission. The final point I would make is then recommendation C, which effectively asks the board to continue to support this work from April 2025, specifically with respect to some revenue funding to continue to support the development of the evidence base and the work, so that we can continue the work through to September. So that's recommendation C. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Damien. Any comments, questions? Councillor Lewis.
Getting good at getting in first.
You are.
Thank you. Obviously, great document, but there are a couple of sort of points I'd like to sort of pick up. The first one is in the section 3, the regional profile component. Seems to be missing the sort of issue of rural connectivity, barriers to growth, that kind of stuff, travel to learn, travel to work, digital connectivity. That can be sort of emphasised in some way. That would be great. Then scooping over to section 5, there's this point around cities as engine for growth, and I wouldn't dispute that, but however, we have a lot of market towns across our 2 counties as well, which are also pretty vital engines for growth, and beyond that as well. So I'd like to sort of capture that element as a priority within and it's a route of sustainable growth as well, if we think about it in those terms. A couple of clarity points. One is around diversification, and it mentions it, but it's not very clear whether we're talking about rural diversification or not. And then we talk a little bit later about the visitor economy, and in that element, should that sort of reference the rural economy is wider than just the sort of visitor economy, if you see what I mean. And therefore, if we just sort of clarify what we mean in those two points and how they relate to each other, I think would be helpful as well.
Thank you. Councillor Gilby.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Damien on his appointment as Permanent Executive Director for Strategy Inclusive Growth. You've been with us for over a year now, and it's great to see that you were staying with us. My comments substantially about the emerging spatial vision proposition, and in particularly addressing sort of the proposals for the northeastern part of the region. I'm really pleased that the economic benefit of the Chesterfield Canal continues to be recognised. It is not just has the towns along it, which will be powerhouses for delivering growth, but the canal itself is a way in which that growth can be delivered and supported. For instance, the the health and well-being benefits of that corridor to the adjacent homes that have been built in recent years and will be continued to be built as part of our ambition to ensure that everyone has a home. And in addition, there's great opportunities for promoting our visitor economy, because that corridor also includes international actual travel routes like the Transpennine Trail, and that means that people in the Netherlands and the Benelux countries and Germany and even as far as Turkey, who are active cyclists, can get to us, and hopefully they will bring their money with them and spend it in our local region. And it's great to see the recently produced master plan by the Chesterfield Canal Society that proposes in the North East Derbyshire area to have a boat lift very similar to the one in Falkirk, and we all know what a great success that has been. So really good document, and I'm particularly pleased with the spatial strategy document. Can we just change the term canal towns in the text to match the canal corridor in the map though, please? I think that's just an administrative error that I'm quite keen on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilby. Councillor Radulovic.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. When looking through the spatial strategy, I want to return to a theme that I've always talked about, and that is the needs for the spatial strategy to reflect the social and economic needs of the areas. One of the great issues that we have in this country, and the 1.5 million promised new homes in 5 years, 1.5 million 2 or 3 bedroom detached or semi-detached houses will not be the answer to the housing crisis. With the ageing profile that we've got, particularly in this country over the next 20 years, and people living with more complex medical needs, the need to ensure that we have the right types of development and the right types of social bits within a development becomes much more paramount than I think it's been given in the past. And I was dismayed recently when the latest announcement was that local members will not be involved in planning decisions, and that it will be developer-led with planning officers taking out this factor. How do you and how do we ensure that we actually meet the social and economic needs of the area? Because this is what's caused over the ferry for 30 years to build the right kind of houses for people with disabilities and more complex medical needs, that we don't continue to allow the developments of areas and regions that do not meet that social and economic need. So for me, one of the great issues about planning in particular is to look at those complex needs as well as the infrastructure needed to service that. And so I would ask therefore that you start to engage much more deeply in looking at those complex medical needs, particularly down the area of West Valley that has a history of respiratory, heart disease, it has high levels of diabetes, and those complex medical needs require complex medical solutions through housing if we are not to continue to bankrupt the NHS and social care and social services. So again, my plea for you is to look at that social and economic need and to assess what an area needs in terms of strategy and put that forward, rather than just allowing developers to build 3-bedroom detached houses on greenfield sites.
Thank you. Councillor McEwen.
Thanks, Matt. I think for me, just my comments are mainly on the spatial strategy. To a certain extent, I still have a little bit of concern around the loop. It's sort of builders connecting together the region, yet misses out a great big chunk of it down one side. And I can appreciate, some of the reasons within the narrative why it does that, but I think that we're still missing the trick. If we're talking about sort of connecting the whole of the region, and particularly in some of the narrative for the loop that says around sort of, effectively drawing people away from some of the honeypots. I know to a certain extent quite a lot of honeypots in the Peak District are in the Peaks and Dale bit that's not included in it. And I think given that there's a number of trails that are already within that patch, I I think they're just missing a trick that would help us to sort of get, you know, if not quite a quick chance, a sort of a good start on it by being able to sort of link up and rebatch some of those existing trails and help us to get this network established possibly a lot quicker than it may well be otherwise. Thanks.
I would just say before Damien comes back that it's very much the concept rather than the specific detail, and I think there's a lot of opportunities given the representations that we've had and also the discussions that my sustainable travel ambassador Alan Simpson has been having with various different groups about how they would want to connect into that loop of places. So I think the concept is a good one. It's more about then the delivery in terms of where the route actually goes and how it incorporates it and how it looks at local loops that might link into one larger loop as well. Councillor Spencer.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, all I wanted to say, I very much welcome the revenue expenditure in the development of schemes to move forward. And I think that's a very important part of the whole ambition, because we all know local authorities, the constituent bodies of this group, struggle to find those resources to develop plans to such an extent that it can actually be delivered. And I think that is of paramount importance we continue to do that. And I look forward to the detail coming forward of how the constituent bodies can tap into that resource and make sure we develop the plans accordingly. And just one other thing I want to mention, Councillor Lewis has already mentioned, that's diversification grants, particularly in rural areas. There is a really good example of the diversification programme that took place over many years, over different governments, that allowed rural communities diversification grants to develop business opportunities and jobs in rural areas. And I think that's a key element of an area that we need to focus on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And Councillor Peacock.
Thank you, Mayor. And I welcome the document. I think it's very interesting, thought-provoking. Reading through it, my mind went to how we look at productivity. There's a direct correlation between areas of disadvantage and low productivity, which in turn is a direct correlation to historically low investment in those areas. But obviously there's therefore a direct correlation between those things and health inequalities. And one of the big things that I talk about, certainly within my patches, is investing money in those disadvantaged areas hasn't having the biggest impact on productivity and therefore economic growth. So it's just one area that I'd just like to make sure the Inclusive Growth Commission looks into, that we look at how we unlock investment in those areas that have been left behind from the years, because I think that has the biggest impact on our economic growth as a region.
Thank you. Damien, do you want to come back in on any of those things?
Just say thank you for all the comments. Very, very helpful. I think, including Councillor Lewis, your comments around this diversification point. There are, certainly within the local growth plan economic assessment portion of it, it does speak to some of those opportunities and those feel like those sort of policy challenges in building a coherent plan for the economy with a region that is so diverse in terms of the scale, the spatial disparities, and also sectorally as well. You see, so one of the things that, especially in the latter half of the pack, the plan is trying to wrestle with is how do we find in the next phase of this work and then conclude that right balance between the sort of traditional expansion of the tradable economy, the sort of innovation-led intensification of the urban economy in a region which is 2,000 square miles, and clearly a large number of jobs, including on the visitor economy, as you say, exist outside of those urban centres. For this local growth plan to speak to and be inclusive for all parts of the region, we need to work with and find that balance, which is going to be a key area of focus, as you quite rightly allude to. So it'd be great to pick that up with your portfolio lead hat on, especially to make sure that we're giving due emphasis to it. Plenty of other points there. Ken, I don't know if there's anything on the spatial priorities you want to pick up.
All noted, I think, as the Mayor said. Yeah. It's an ongoing conversation, it's the start of a conversation, so keen to see how we can take those views on board and develop it further.
Great. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so recommendations are: note the interim report of the Inclusive Growth Commission to be provided under separate cover and published subject to agreed plans after this board meeting. Board will continue to sponsor the work through subsequent phases of the work through to the final report earmarked for publication in September. Endorse the baseline regional economic profile at Appendix A, the spatial vision outline at Annex B. These will underpin immediate policy and investment choices for the developing local growth plan, and agree to continue development of a local growth plan allied to an ambitious spatial vision as a precursor to a spatial development strategy, by allocating £1 million from the investment fund to bring forward products and the necessary business cases. Are we all agreed on that? Yes. Thank you very much. We then move on to item 8, which is the Q3 budget monitoring, and I'll ask Nick Bell to present.
Well, thank you, Mayor, and good morning, everybody. So the report in front of you provides a financial position for the combined county authority to the end of Q3 of this financial year, i.e. to the 31st of December 2025. It builds on the information that's been previously reported to the board in the Q1 and the Q2 reports, and with the last quarterly budget monitoring report that the board will receive for this financial year. The next report relating to the current financial year will be the draft outturn report, which will be brought to the board in June. So in relation to this report, starting with revenue first, the latest forecast position is for an underspend of £1.208 million at the end of the financial year. This is £223,000 less than the underspend of £1.431 million forecast in the Q2 monitoring report. Actually, there's been really very little movement in the forecast outturn between Q2 and Q3, which demonstrates we've now developed strong and effective systems to monitor spend and to keep a really effective grip on the combined county authorities' finances. The main differences between the latest forecast outturn and the Q2 forecast relates to the planned increase in capacity within the combined county authority to enable us to deliver on all of our key programmes. And worth mentioning as well that the latest forecast revenue underspend has been included in the budget assumptions for 25-26 that the board will recall it approved at its February meeting. With the capital programme, we are now forecasting an underspend of £5 million following the proposed rephasing of the Brownfield Housing Fund and the capital schemes for the 24-25 investment fund. This is a reduced underspend compared to the forecast at Q2, which was £9.5 million underspend. Good progress has been made with the Brownfield Housing Fund, we'll hear about that later in the agenda, and the first payments are expected to be made early in the next financial year. The capital schemes for the 24-25 investment fund are also included in the board's agenda today for approval. These 6 schemes are estimated to cost around £14 million now, rather than the original estimate at Q2 of £9.5 million. And that's the reason for the change in the forecast capital underspend that we've reported today. The board are also asked to approve 2 other minor amendments to the capital programme, namely a small reduction of £41,000 in the 24-25 capital income for the East Midlands investment zone, because we've now got the final allocations from government in relation to that grant, and also an increase of £73,000 the amount set aside for the purchase of IT equipment, which reflects the increased staffing capacity which I noted a little bit earlier in the introduction. So the revenue and capital reserves position, to mention and to move on to those, they're still consistent with those used to determine the budget for 2025-26. And I'd also like to remind the board that the 25-26 budget includes the use of a very large proportion of those reserves, which will lead to a significant reduction in general revenue reserves to around £5 million, which is a prudent amount moving forwards. In terms of the 24-25 revenue reserves, the board are asked to approve 3 drawdowns from reserves, reflecting the use of some public transport capacity fund, the funding of the Inclusive Growth Commission, and the use of some of the former LEP reserves to fund a small deficit on former LEP-related activities in 24-25 as well. So, happy to take any further questions in relation to the report.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? No, thank you. Can I just take this opportunity, Nick, I believe this is your last board meeting, and to thank you very much on behalf of the whole board for your contribution. It's been fantastic working with you, and it really has made a difference, and I think we can see how well set out our accounts are, and the custodian, you as custodian of that responsibility. So thank you very much, and we wish you well as you move on to new and exciting challenges.
Thank you, and I wish the board and obviously the region well as well in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so let's just take, hopefully, some agreement on those. I'm not actually going to read out all of those recommendations, so you can see them all. So, are we happy to agree all of those recommendations? Agreed. Thank you very much. On to item 9, Transport Investment Programme. And Alex is here. Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just give a brief overview and background to the paper. The report's been presented to provide an update on all of the transport funding streams available to the region from 25-26 onwards. There have been a number of announcements over recent months, so this just brings them all together into a single position. It's an update on where we're at with each of those. There is a mix of existing funding streams, such as the Integrated Transport Block, which is an annual allocation that local authorities have been receiving for a number of years, but also new allocations available to us exclusively as a combined authority. EMCCA will be the accountable body for all of the funding streams, but delivery will continue to be made through the 4 constituent authorities as well as the REDCA. The primary recommendations that we're asking for from board today are related to 2 funding streams for which we need to make submissions back to DFT before the end of this month. Board are asked to approve the distribution of those schemes and then the detailed profile, which is listed in Annex A of the report. The 2 programmes being the City Region Sustainable Transport Supplement, or CRSTS as it's commonly known, which is a £66 million allocation mix of capital and revenue, and the bus grant or bus services improvement plan funding, which is a £21 million capital allocation. As mentioned, Annex A lists the detailed profile of those. This was presented to Transport's Digital Connectivity Committee last week and was supported. There was one variation that the committee asked for, and that was specific to a couple of the allocations given to Derbyshire County Council. They wanted to merge them into a single line to provide a little bit more flexibility. It doesn't make any difference to the total allocation to them or to the total allocations within the programme or to the intended delivery activity. It just enables a bit further flexibility when we submit that back to the Department for Transport. Apologies, my screen just froze. The 2 programmes have had to be brought together quite rapidly, in particular CRSTS, where we only received notification of the annual award at the end of January this year. It was vital that we brought them to this particular cycle of meetings because of the submission deadline to the Department for Transport. If we didn't make this meeting, we would then have missed the department's submission deadlines, resulting in significant delay in us being able to start delivery of those programmes. Both of the proposals have been developed collaboratively between the 4 constituent authorities and the transport team at EMCCA. So it's through working with our constituent authorities and with the transport teams within there that we've reached a position where we have this agreed proposal that's in front of you today. In particular reference to CRSTS, it's vital that we take this opportunity to demonstrate our capability to DFT, but it's also a really good opportunity for us to do that. This is the first time that we've received this funding, as it is unique to combined authorities. It's a single-year settlement that they provided us with on this occasion. This is effectively an advance payment of our 27 to 32 allocation, which was notified indicatively last year. This opportunity gives us the chance to show them our capabilities to deliver, to demonstrate to them how we can quickly turn this money into benefits for the region. In doing so, we increase our chances of getting a stronger settlement for the period 26 to 27, again another advance on our 27 to 32 allocation. But in doing that, we effectively put ourselves in a position where we have a 7-year funding certainty, which is a luxury that we haven't had in any local authorities for a considerable amount of time. In order to meet that deadline and that 1-year profile, we've had to take quite a pragmatic approach to pulling the programme together on this occasion. So we've had to focus on what are the most immediate priorities for ourselves and for our constituent authorities. The opportunity that the revenue allocation gives us to start developing schemes for future years' programmes. So the £11 million revenue is being used to develop those future investments. But also how we can demonstrate deliverability quickly. So what are those schemes that provide us with the early wins and that demonstrable deliverable capability? As we do develop over the rest of this year, with a view to having a 7-year programme, we'll be able to put in place a more strategic and more structured approach to how we allocate funding. working with documents such as the corporate plan, the emerging local transport plan, the investment and the growth plan. So we will be able to produce those longer-term, those more strategic and more comprehensive submissions as we take use of the 7-year availability to us. The BSIP programme has been pulled together on a slightly different basis in that the 4 constituent authorities already have a published bus services improvement plan, and all of the schemes that we're proposing for submission to DfT have all been derived from those plans. I've used the phrase proposals quite a lot when I've been talking about the programmes. The reason we're referring to the proposals is they are still subject to that final DfT approval. So there's no suggestion that beyond the board today, locally we're looking to make any changes, but we do have to remain open to the fact that DfT may request some variations once they receive our submissions at the end of the month. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you very much. Councillor Spencer.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thanks very much for the presentation. We obviously welcome any investment into our transport network across the region as a whole, like I was saying. But this, I see, is a great opportunity for the organisation to put forward a vision of how we're going to move people around the East Midlands as a whole with a strategic plan and a strategic network which is integrated and timetables adjusted to actually deliver on that. Obviously we need to bring people into the East Midlands, but when we get them here, the ability to move around is of paramount importance for all development programmes, and in particular for our young people to get to and from work. And all I would say, Madam Mayor, is that we need to make sure that we don't look at the proposals purely on a numbers basis, because it is unfortunately the case that rural connectivity costs more than urban connectivity. That will always be the case because of the downtime travel between conurbations across the whole of the East Midlands as a whole. So what I would ask is to develop a strategic vision for moving people around the area as a whole. We try and develop a plan for the integration of the networks we have at present to be timetabled accordingly to improve the connectivity, particularly for young people and the elderly, to get around. And then we take a pragmatic approach to funding areas or funding in areas that actually deliver on the overall strategy. And I'm sure everybody in the room is sighing not another strategy, but we've never had a strategic strategy for transport in the East Midlands, and we desperately need it. Thank you.
I've got a number of points. You want to come back in at the end? I'll take a few of those. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, great to see this huge investment coming forward into what is the #1 priority of residents. So it's good to be cracking on with that. At Nottinghamshire County Council, we've got a pipeline of projects ready to go to spend the money. We're gearing up supply chains, but we just need confirmation of when we will actually get the money. So some guidance on when the formal notice of that money will be sent to us would be really helpful, because obviously we have only got a year to spend it, and if it takes 2 months to receive the formal notice, we're 10 months into, we've only got 10 months left to crack on with the work, and there's lots of roads in Nottinghamshire that need it. So just some clarity on when we can when LAs will be formally informed would be helpful. The 25% retention is still in there, that's understandable, but again, clarity on the process of unlocking that, and if we're waiting for DfT to tell us what that process is, then can you give us a timeline on that, on when we expect that process to be outlined, and tell us that. And again, on the timeline, all this is subject to the DfT signing it off. What's the timeline for that as well? So clarity on those 3 points would be helpful, please.
Councillor Gilby.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just reflecting back on the early summer of last year when myself and representatives from both the Harworth and Devonshire group met with you on the what used to be known as the Staveley Works corridor, and I'm sure the name will be changed over time. We had the opportunity to present to you how that area can create £4 billion worth of growth for the benefit of the region, creating new new homes and more and better jobs in their thousands. However, that brownfield site is currently locked because there isn't an easy road route into it, and so therefore I'm very pleased to see that there's funding in this that will enable further feasibility studies to unlock that Chesterfield Staveley regeneration route. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with all of the sort of comments made as far as it's definitely a welcome pot of money to receive into the region and start developing those critical plans that we need to. Thank you, first of all, for clarity around that sort of flexible pot around the funds for capital expenditure. That will give us a great deal of flexibility about how we can spend those resources as and when we need to be able to do all those very sort of specific item plans that we classic case in point. They can take up quite a significant chunk of resource to do, for example. The second thing I wanted to sort of outline was, sound quite right, it is quite critical in terms of operational planning to have that timeline so that we don't stand down teams that could be doing that work. As we've often faced in the past, it can be a bit hair-raising when you're doing that, and then the ability to deliver is taken away if we can't get that money in time. And the third point is around sort of key cycle networks. Again, welcome to see some investment in there. What we do need to think about, I think, longer term, and that's not just for the key cycle network, but for any kind of cycling networks that we have across our region, and we have worked very well with Nottinghamshire in the past and linked some of the coal trail, pit trails across the two counties and tied up key assets as well of connectivity for cyclists and all that. It's all brilliant. The only trouble is we don't have ongoing maintenance funding for these sorts of things, and we just need to think a little bit more long term about how we address that issue as well. And you know, like all infrastructure networks, they do deteriorate over time. So perhaps a little bit of long-term thinking about how we address that issue as well would be helpful.
Councillor Radulovic.
Yeah, thank you. Question around integrated ticketing. One of the key issues around mobility is the fact that you've got integrated ticketing. However, it's just a little bit sporadic. In my inbox, so for instance, the south is basically covered with integrated ticketing. There's nothing in the entirety of the north. And will you be working with the four constituent transport authorities to ensure integrated ticketing is available across the whole of the EMCCA area?
And Councillor Swan.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, you know, what can I say? We are extremely pleased in Derby that we have the opportunity to utilise some of this very key funding to address some of our biggest challenges across the city. However, I'm sure the people in Darley would be and will be really, really pleased that part of this funding will help us develop a feasibility study for a much loved bridge that doesn't just serve Darley, that serves the people of Derby City. Placed in a World Heritage Site, it is something that, without this funding, to be quite frank, I wondered how we were ever going to move on this much needed project. So, amongst all the other stuff, I would like to say thank you.
Okay, thank you. Adam, you want to come back in?
So, firstly, Councillor Spencer, the questions around sort of the future strategic framework. We are also developing the local transport plan, which will provide that framework for the regional transport investment over the coming years. The comments that you made are really helpful in terms of making sure we're recognising the different issues that go in there. That's a piece of work that again has been done collaboratively between the four constituency authorities and the EMCCA, currently under the auspices of the Transport Committee, who received a paper last week with an update on that. But that will provide us with that structure and that framework through which to make sure we are meeting that strategic need. With regards to Councillor Smith's questions around the timescales, yes, fully understand that. We've only got a year to deliver this funding and to make our case, as I've been describing it. We don't want to lose a quarter of that while we wait for approval. The FT haven't been able to give us guarantees in terms of when they will respond, but what they have agreed with us is that we can share things with them in advance of the submission deadline to work through any queries and any possible objections or concerns they may have. They fully understand our position in that we need this reassurance from them and this approval from them as immediately as possible, because with a March the 31st deadline, by the time they're opening it, we're already eating into our delivery period. So unfortunately I can't give you an exact date, but I can reassure you that the department are very aware of our concerns and our need to have that confirmed by them as quickly as possible. And I think that also answers the questions around the timescales for getting those approvals in place and that commitment. Councillor Radulovic, the majority of the paper that I've just talked through there is our capital investments, and there is also a revenue programme supported through the Bus Services Improvement Plan. That is part of the public transport transition process at the moment, which is a separate paper that went to Transport Committee. In terms of our commitment to integrated ticketing, that is again something that will come through the local transport plan. It's one of those priorities. The LTP isn't just about capital investment, it's about all of our transport needs and what that does and how that serves the needs of the region. And so integrated ticketing is something that has been raised loud and clear through all the groups that we've worked with so far in developing that emerging plan, and I would expect there to be further detail on that as we progress.
Thank you very much for that. And I think this is a really exciting and demonstrable of what EMCCA can achieve working in partnership with our constituent councils. And I think the members of the public, whether they are in Darley Abbey or in areas where challenging landslips may take place in the counties, other parts of road networks where they have been looking to see some progress, it may be in feasibility studies or simply to actually move on with particular projects, we'll see that this is the result of having a combined county authority and a mayor, but also of having constituent councils that are working in partnership together to look at this. And one of the areas that I've also asked the Sustainable Travel Ambassador to look at is the opportunities of connecting up the active travel routes that sit in the different parts of our region and to see what it is that we may require in order to be able to do that. So thank you very much for that. Can I therefore move to the recommendations and ask if you are happy to approve all of those recommendations? You happy to approve? Yeah, great. Thank you very much. So we move on now to the skills and employment priorities and the Youth Trailblazer Guarantee. I'm asking Adam Swirsky to present.
Thank you very much, Mayor. So the Youth Guarantee Trailblazer sits within the Youth and Career strand of skills and employment. It's one of our key priority areas, and the Trailblazer itself is one of the corporate plan delivery priorities that we were talking about earlier in the meeting, which is part of the broader mission of trying to equip young people with the skills they need to succeed, as well as meeting business demand. East Midlands was selected as one of the 8 areas in the country to be a Trailblazer site, which is going to inform the future of the government's youth guarantee that starts to come into effect. It's a £5 million programme, so each site is awarded up to 5 million, targeted at 18 to 21-year-olds specifically, to support young people into work and training. And it's again a 12-month programme, so running from April until March 2026. The paper sets out a summary of the proposal that we've put forward to DFE, which prioritises supporting young people, reflecting the diversity of the needs across the region, and also the different areas and geographic spread as well as putting youth voice at the centre of our proposal. There's 3 key elements to it. The first is around supporting young people transitioning out to further education, into either additional education, training or employment. There's a local authority-led tailored support component, particularly focused on young people who face additional barriers. And this also links to another initiative within this youth and careers area, which is called Connected Futures, which is focused specifically on young people with learning disabilities and with autistic spectrum conditions. So that is a linked part of the agenda. The third strand is around employer participation, and that includes piloting the Good Employment Charter that we're looking eventually to have across the region. We're also including in our proposal 2 additional pieces. One is to have a research and learning partner, which will help us with our local evaluation, but also really making sure that we're capturing the learning throughout the delivery of the programme and building up a better understanding for the benefit of all of us of provision and need across the region and where we can make evidence-based interventions. And we'll also be bringing in a data discovery partner, because one of the pieces of core infrastructure that we need to deliver the youth guarantee in future is good data sharing arrangements, the ability to use digital tools to really understand need and where we can intervene in what's working over time. As I said, youth voice and engagement are central to the model, and that is both building up and working with our youth committee, but also youth engagement forums across the region. There is an opportunity to work with DFE to refine our delivery across the course of the Trailblazer delivery period, and also, of course, to use this as a chance to shape that national youth guarantee as it's being developed over the coming months. So the paper asks for delegated authority to make arrangements with grants and contracts to deliver the Trailblazer, which should begin in the coming weeks, but also to make any changes based on final feedback from DFE or DWP as we finalise the proposal. It's worth saying, since the paper was submitted, we did have some very positive feedback from DFE. I think the core strands of the proposal resonate with what they were looking for. They've asked for a few more bits of detail, and we're still pending final sign-off.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, Chris Jenkinson.
Hi, Mayor. I'm sure we will, and we should welcome the report and welcome the additional investment that's come in. That will not only help intervene with a very disadvantaged group within our community, but give the focus that's necessary to address what has been a very persistent problem of NEETs ever since the late 1970s, 80s, with the kind of restructuring of the economy and growth of the knowledge sector and the closure of pathways into employment, particularly pathways for young people who leave education with few or no formal qualifications. There have been no shortage of pathfinders and trailblazers in this space over that last 30 years. And I would hope that, and I am conscious the parameters of this programme will be set by the DFE. But I hope that in the evaluation, we not only evaluate the outcomes of this project, but compare those to the outcomes of the very many projects that have been employed over the last sort of few decades, looking to reduce the number of NEETs, because I think that that's important. I'm also, I don't know if it's possible or desirable, but it seems to me that there's, in the report, a lack of focus on what success looks like, and what are the targets of this. In previous programmes, there are very clear targets. Some might say 2 prescriptive targets, but to reduce, throughout the noughties, reduce NEETs from 10.7% to 7.5%. I kind of got from the report that I knew the problem, knew the cohorts, knew the investment, but were very unclear about what success looks like. And I think if we are making such a significant investment, we ought to have the confidence to be able to at least point in that direction. But I also wanted to come on and commend you, Mayor, for introducing the Good Employment Charter, which not only appears in this report, but appears in the corporate plan that we discussed and agreed earlier. I've always thought that strategic authorities shouldn't just be investment vehicles or consumers of services, but should seek to change. As a seat of government for 2.3 million people, it should seek to change, disrupt in some cases, the economy so it works in the interests of citizens and communities. And one way in which we could do that is through this notion of a good employment charter, reflecting the values that are inherent within this authority. And employers who pay the real living wage, have good conditions of service, decent pensions, I would unashamedly argue the recognition of independent trade unions. Now, they can't be performative that they don't mean anything, or too rigid that they don't make the jump from policy to practice. So I hope that there'll be an opportunity, as welcome as this is, an opportunity for members to contribute over the coming weeks and months in the development of that charter and the strategy for rolling it out. But, very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kath.
Thank you, Mayor. Clearly very supportive, but two comments really. Both the City of Derby and the City of Nottingham have priority investment areas ongoing, looking at performance of young people in our cities. And we're just coming to the end of those projects where we've got to put in legacy funding or bids. So we need to sort of work together so that we don't try to put in the same things, so that we could be beneficial, because we're more on the school end and you're into the further lower down. I mean, I think it's fair to say many of our needs are part of our SEND community. And there are some good projects at the moment that, and that's when I'm really interested in almost what you said about a good employer. So there are internship programmes ongoing around. I'm going to say the University of Derby is one. We have 10 SEND members of our staff. But we also do have to make sure that many people say they'd like to improve needs, but they don't want to employ needs. And so I think that for me, that would be a really big part for me about actually, we've now got our hospital trust because we've made it work to do that. We're trying to get Rolls-Royce in the city because this is a city-based project. But we were funded by central government to kick-start it. And I just would like that we do look at that real employer bit, because if you don't employ them, and we all say that everyone else should employ them, that is a big problem. But I think that we can have a huge policy on what does a good employer look like, and it needs to be part of everybody's domain. So just maybe we could catch up and look at some of the projects that came out of our priority areas in Derby and Nottingham, because I don't want to put in for the same money, and I want that we still could get money to support this project too.
Thank you. I've got a few more contributions. Councillor Gilby.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I agree with Chris's comments about the importance of being able to identify what success looks like, and I think one of the key successes of this programme will be about introducing young people to the world of work, contact with employers. Statistically, young people who meet with employers during their last year of education or soon after are more likely to find employment. And there is quite rightly, as Cass says, a role for the larger anchor organisations in our region to play a part. But let's not forget the many other businesses. We are a region that thrives on small businesses, and currently in Chesterfield we've got a call out to those local employers to step forward to engage in this programme, so that young people's opportunity to find out what goes on in the world of work is widened to more, to prevent them becoming not in employment, training or education after they've left education, and also that will make a contribution to this new programme, and it's great to see trailblazing brought to our part of the world.
Thank you. Councillor McKeown.
Thanks, Matt. I think for me the only slight concern I've got in a way is just how will this sort of setup work for those that are on our fringes and that are going over the border to FE colleges or other institutions, and how are we going to be able to provide that support for them? Because I think particularly for sort of the mental health needs support, I think there's a legacy still of COVID. I think there's that support that's needed to them, and yeah, it's just, yeah, for them that are not part of sort of any of the Derbyshire or Nottinghamshire FE colleges, so how do we get the support for them? Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I do not like the language of needs, and I do not like the individual sectors of our community to be badged in any way or form in that way. But having said that, recognising the challenges of that individual group is of paramount importance. And one thing I do feel that the constituent bodies can do and should do, this isn't about creating purely jobs in the public sector. This is about giving opportunities to young people who, for whatever reason, find themselves in a disadvantaged place. And one of the things we can do as authorities, we all expend many millions of pounds in procuring services from external organisations that are provided within our bodies. And Derbyshire, I think, is about £365 million of expenditure per annum, and I'm sure the other constituency bodies are very similar of that scale. And we could come to an arrangement with the private sector to encourage them to, for every £1 million we spent, 1 in a million, one apprenticeship, traditional apprenticeship programme, we would ask them to engage and provide on our behalf. It worked in the past and it will work in the future, but what failed was the fact we failed to monitor the success of that investment and make sure that those young people who take into those roles continue to remain in those roles and develop through the companies they went to work with and for. So it only works if it's a partnership arrangement. It only works if we monitor the success of delivery of those opportunities. And I'll just refer you back to the top 100 in the country. Many of those companies are run by people who started on a traditional apprenticeship programme and never went to university and never went into higher education. Food for thought, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Heselbrave.
Thank you, Mayor. Very much welcome the Youth Guarantee Trailblazer, and it's always been a concern of mine since I became a councillor with my education background about the number of people who are not in education, employment or training. It's shortened down to needs. I know it puts a label on, but we have to highlight that and actually categorise those people. And I think one of the issues here is it starts at 16, this programme, but you can, if you're in a school, you have a really good idea of the young people going through in years 7 to 9 secondary school who are likely to become needs. And so it starts earlier than 16. Careers education and guidance has a lot to do with that, and we have a really good system across the footprint of careers education and guidance, but I think schools need to work more closely with careers education and guidance so teachers are clear that they are working with people who are at risk of becoming needs. And that's kind of a safeguarding issue, because once someone becomes a need post 16, what are they doing with their time, and who are they vulnerable to being approached by? So there is an issue there. They're at risk of exploitation, particularly if they are SEND people. So we need to have a look at that, and I do think we need to talk to the regional director from the DFE who's concerned with education about talking about how we get, in the whole thing of Get Britain working, how we get schools to not just look at careers education and guidance, but the wider issues around certain young people, so that they're steered into a path where they're more likely to continue with some training post 16. It's really pleasing that in this process we've got a research and learning partner, and that can be a really powerful tool for future work on what is really good practice. It's disseminated and it's also built upon. And I particularly agree with Chris's point on the good employment charter, and I would suggest that you look at the Greater Manchester Good Employers Charter. It's got its own website and it does monthly introductions, I think aimed at businesses clearly, to actually get more and more businesses. A really, really good programme the whole thing is really focused on what is the offer for the employees as well, and what a good employer does for its employees. And some of those features are flexibility in working and stuff like that, so it could be family friendly. But we also have to remember, as has been said by Trish, that the vast majority of businesses by far are SMEs, and MSMEs I think is the term as well, which may be more diffident about joining something like that because of the commitment. So we need to make sure we're working with our SMEs particularly to get them involved, and that it starts to mushroom and grow exponentially in terms of take-up. So, of course, I fully support the recommendations.
Thank you. Adam, do you want to come back in?
Thank you very much, Mayor. Just reflecting back on Chris's original point about what are we able to do differently here from previous programmes, I think the opportunity is to use actually the heft of the strategic authority to operate in a different way. And I think some of those success criteria are about short-term impact. You know, how many young people can we support into education and training in the year? But there's also a big long-term element of this, which is setting ourselves up as a region to put the kind of infrastructure in place that will enable us to get the best outcomes from the Youth Guarantee and other programmes in future. And certainly to Kat's point, I think absolutely we'll work in partnership and make sure we're building on what's already there. But I think the opportunity here is to put this programme in the context of our wider agenda, and whether that is, for example, the focus on work experience, which I know is an important theme of our programme, and will become an important policy agenda as well, so we can link that in here. On SEND, absolutely, that's the focus of the Trailblazer, but it's also linked to the Connect to Work programme, which we'll be talking about later in the year with the board, where we'll have the opportunity of investing in support to help those individuals into employment. Again, the Career Hub, which we deliver, that starts at age 3, so we've got that opportunity to start early. The Good Employment Charter we've talked about, and our wider programme around bringing youth voice into decision making more widely. So I think that's how we might see the opportunity to bring the Trailblazer, not just as a standalone programme, but really as part of that wider agenda.
Thank you very much. I think this is a really exciting opportunity for not just this combined authority, but essentially for our young people across the region. Too many of them have not had the opportunities that they need in some of our communities, where they have been brought up perhaps not just by first generation, but in second generations, where they have never seen work. And this will be a chance to plug them back into our communities, into our working opportunities, to build the skills that they have and to build a better life and future for them. And we have all of those ingredients within our region, 90,000 plus SME businesses, some, as you say, of the top 100 businesses in this country, but also a whole range of other elements that we can bring together within our combined county authority to make a much better offer and guarantee for our young people. And I hope that that will be a marker of this authority in the future, is an outstanding offer for our young people, for those who live in the East Midlands region. So can I invite you all to support this, and I hope that we will be able to bring back some really positive and encouraging news over coming months. Are we happy to support these recommendations? Great, thank you. We move on now to the investment fund pipeline, and I'm asking Tom to outline the case for us.
Thank you, Matt. So as you'll see, the recommendation on this paper is to approve all 6 business cases that have been brought forward as part of the Anchor Investment Fund. As you'll recall, at the December the 16th board, 6 projects were approved by the board to bring them onto the Anchor Investment pipeline. Subsequently, after that date, we have had staff business cases submitted to EMCCA. In line with the interim assurance framework, those business cases have been reviewed internally by our investment panel at EMCCA, which is made up of officers across legal, finance, governance, and other colleagues within the authority. Following their review and recommendations, we submitted a paper to the Investment Committee on the 24th of February for a decision where a recommendation for approval was made for the 6 projects to come forward. That was passed by the Investment Committee on that day. Further information was then received by us again because there was a recommendation that went forward at that point in time that we would ask for a mayoral decision in consultation with the constituent authorities based on those business cases that were submitted through to us. We've now reviewed the subsequent information which was submitted by the constituent authorities back in at the investment panel, and subsequently a lot of information with regards to financial information, of which Nick Bell has signed that off. We are now changing the recommendation based on that basis to ask for the board to give full approval to the 6 business cases and the 6 projects which come forward at the investment fund. They are the Avenues to the Access Project, Broadmarsh, Infinity Crest Typing Centre, South Africa, Trent Supercluster, and the Derby City Centre Development Enabling Projects. And as I say, they've all been signed off by the investment panel, they've been given a recommendation for approval by the investment committee, and now asking to be approved.
Thank you very much, Tom. Can I just remind board members that there is an exempt appendix to this report with obviously commercially sensitive information. So should members wish to discuss any aspect of the exempt appendix, we will need to move this discussion to a bit later in the agenda and go into a private session. So please be aware of that should you wish to raise any issues or questions on those points. Comments? Questions? Okay. Can I again just say that this is a really exciting moment for the board. You know, we've gone through a year with constituent councils eager to get money out the door, and this is the board meeting where we're certainly doing that. And indeed, the decision that you took in December related to around £9.5 million, and what we're actually moving on to here is just over, I think, £14 million of investment across the authorities into projects that we all know are really significant for our local communities. So again, can I invite you to support these 6 projects? If you've got no further questions or comments, all of those in favour of this investment? All agree? Thank you. Brilliant. Okay, we move on now to the Brownfield Housing Fund allocations, and I'll invite Barry to present. Not that Barry, the other Barry. You were just getting a bit... Just keeping you on your toes.
Well done. So whilst the paper is self-explanatory and I don't intend to reiterate it verbatim, I'd just like to add a bit of colour to the text. So just as a reminder, today we're asking the board to note the amendments and the status to the list of preferred schemes, and secondly to approve a delegation to approve with the Mayor in conjunction with the 4 constituent leaders to approve business cases that will need consideration and determination prior to the next board meeting in June, which is now some time away. I can update the meeting today to confirm that the valuation queries for the new Balderton scheme have now been satisfactorily resolved, and this full business case, together with those for Alder Close, Shirebrook and Miller Close, Chesterfield, will be submitted subject to your approval of the above delegation, been forthcoming for immediate approval in March. So these will be the first 3 schemes to draw the funding down from our allocation, and I would anticipate that these will be followed shortly thereafter with schemes at Levers Court, Arnold, the former Argos building at Ilkeston, and Shipley Lakeside with the first quarter of 25-26 financial year. It's likely, as noted in the paper, that a number of schemes may be unable to meet the timescales required for delivery for this financial year and will need to be replaced with recommendations that can do so, and we are doing this from the headroom of schemes that we have in the original expressions of interest exercise. Due diligence is already underway on the existing reserve list and will be finalised and submitted to board for approval in line with the previously approved delegations. It's anticipated a number of the current reserve schemes may include a more significant proportion of affordable homes than had been originally anticipated, combining with grant funding being provided by Homes England to maximise public sector leverage. These movements of scheme dynamics are commonplace, and as projects mature and due diligence is continually updated, they'll continue to evolve. We'll continue to collaborate with local authority partners over the suitability and support for these propositions, again based primarily on their deliverability within the time window available for us. In summary, it remains our view that we remain on track to deliver the full allocation as anticipated, to be drawn down before March 26, delivering approximately 1,400 homes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Radulovic.
For the purpose of clarification there, would you give your definition of what is affordable?
Affordable as defined in the planning consent, Councillor. So each local authority has the statutory responsibility to determine their own applications, and those contributions will be as per the description in the planning consent.
The current guidelines is at 80% of market rent. The point I'm making here is that differential is profound across the whole of each district, let alone across the whole of the East Midlands Combined Authority area. And consequently, what is affordable in terms of new build is not affordable to people who live in the area. This is why I keep carping on all the time, and will continue to keep going, about meeting the social and economic needs of an area. If the 80% of market rent is not affordable in the area for people who live there, how is that affordable? And when you look at differences in rental levels, the average rent in across sort of Nottinghamshire is now up to over £700 per month. At 80% of that, how is that affordable for people on minimum wage or living wage or just over? So the point I'm making, Mayor, about this is the fact that affordable is not affordable to the majority of people who live within a locality. And what we're seeing, therefore, are young people, particularly in market towns and rural towns, forced out of accommodation and can't afford to live there. You know, and this is happening in all areas. All I'm asking for is that consideration is given to the prioritisation of affordable housing that meets the social and economic needs of an area. And so when we look at applications that we deal with on so-called brownfield sites, we look at what the area's community needs are, as opposed to looking at it as a financial exercise and saying, if you need bungalows in that area, more disabled facilities for people, dementia-friendly properties, these should be the priorities, not just talking about numbers. That's all we ever talk about housing in this country, is numbers. We're obsessed with it. What is actually needs of an area has got to be more paramount. And I don't want to sound too heavy on you, but when people use the words affordable, it's as though it's some sort of panacea to an area's problems. It isn't. And these needs should be addressed at that very, very earliest stage. What does an area need? What is its priorities? Is it affordable to local people? And does it meet that social and economic profile need of an area? I'm sorry, I will keep returning to this at every opportunity.
I think you raised some really important points, Councillor. Whether or not we can address some of those when we develop our own policies through a spatial plan, I'd invite you to comment, Barry, whether there are opportunities to reflect some of those things.
Yeah, I think Councillor Radulovic, identifies some, very clear problems that exist in the system at the moment. I think we do have the ability to shape our interventions. Certainly you'll be aware of our desire to formalise our arrangements with Homes England and our intervention in the affordable housing programme through our partners there. There is a very keen desire from government at the moment to significantly major on social rent as part of affordable housing delivery. And I think we can probably take those comments on board as we try and develop our own strategy within EMCCA. The Brownfield Fund itself has got very defined parameters and very tight timetables. I've repeatedly said that to this board, and I certainly take on board those comments and we'll do our best to reflect them. But we are working within the limitations of a fund that might not permit us to be that flexible in terms of how we deploy our intervention here, but certainly for our own interventions and our own spatial development plan and our own housing strategy that we reflected earlier on in the meeting today in different papers. I think we can look to major on those comments, because you're absolutely right, it's not just the quantity of housing, it's the type of housing, and those needs are reflected locally in terms of very strong shortages.
Thank you. Councillor Gilby.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I mean, this is yet another success story, and it is the great work that Barry's done with all the councils in the EMCCA region to bring this forward. I think not that Barry, this not ruling that one out.
It's glowing in there.
I'm clipping that bit.
Quite often when Councillor Spencer talks about rural areas, I bet people's minds go to the Peaks and Dales area of Derbyshire, because there are lots of rural areas along the eastern and more industrial flank of the region as well, and it's good to see those places represented in this list of developments. For instance, Langley Mill, Shirebrook and Masden Moor. Masden Moor is right on the edge of the borough of Chesterfield, and it is definitely very rural. And the support that Chesterfield Borough Council will be getting to build council homes in this area, which I hope will be affordable. Our tenants seem to report back to us that they are. And we have lots of ways in which we sustain our tenants in those homes as well. It shows how EMCCA can address pragmatically issues that previous schemes have not been able to, by bringing forward schemes that have previously been considered to be too difficult. So I really do support this work, and I hope to see more of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thanks, Mayor. I know we've spoken about influence over affordable housing, but I wondered what influence EMCCA was having over these sites and the plans on these sites, particularly when we talk about housing for vulnerable and elderly residents, and rather than allowing applications to go through on these sites for thousands of houses and then relying on county councils and city councils to then go and adapt them for elderly people to remain living in the community. I wondered if we could put a bit of influence into these applications to ensure some of these houses that are built on these sites actually already come pre-adapted, ready for elderly residents. And the similar things can be said about children's homes. So at Nottinghamshire County Council we've moved away from big institutional children's homes and actually buying houses in communities where children have better outcomes by living in the community where they're from, and we go on the open market and have to buy these homes and then adapt them. Well, let's be telling big developers on these big sites to build them for us and cut costs down on top tier authorities. So I just wonder what influence, if any, and I'm happy for you to tell me we can't, but what influence, if any, can we have over the developers on these particularly strategic brownfield sites to bring those forward for the local authorities?
Okay, Councillor Peacock.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just firstly, anecdotally, I support what Sam's just said there.
Can we minute that, please? Paul, agree with me.
We are a very collaborative space, I should tell you.
So my inbox of correspondence with people in my ward, not necessarily my district, the majority of that is around exactly what he says, around the need for accommodation for elderly people, and quite frankly we don't have it. Quite frankly, we've not been, for whatever reason, building enough, but we are where we are, and we do need to make sure that as we move forward with different strategies, that we are looking at building. People are getting older, and actually people are living in their elderly accommodation for longer periods. So that's a real pinch point for housing providers at the moment. I think it's something we do need to take on board. The point I wanted to make was I suppose it's, again, parochial to me in a way, the Flowserve site in Bolton. It said we're talking with the company, but I just wondered whether we're also talking with the local authority and the local planning authority just to get some more evidence around that. And I presume, well, and I'm saying that on that particular case, but I think it should be the case for probably all of these, all of the sites and all potential sites that come forward in the future is that there is some local knowledge around a lot of these sites, the history of these sites, which obviously the local planning authorities know about, so I hope we're consulting with those as well.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I listen with interest to my colleague sitting to my left, and he's passionate about making sure that people understand what affordable means. In another place, I sit as a trustee on the oldest housing trust in the country, in actual fact. We have 52 properties. It is in Ashbourne. It's called the Old Trust, believe it or not. It was formed in 1546. And it's run by 15 volunteers. We have no staff. And the reason our homes are affordable is because everything that is provided to them, the residents, are usually elderly who are in a difficult place. The reason it's affordable is because it's run on a charity basis by volunteers. And I wanted to raise it today, Madam Mayor, because at the moment we have a perpetuation of legislative programmes in central government that are making these charities jump through hoops unnecessarily. They are applying the same principles to an old charity trust with 52 properties who look after their residents really well, as they do to a housing association with thousands of properties, and the same legislative programmes and the same expectations are placed on them. So I wanted to raise it today, Mayor, because I do believe, and I know from experience, there are many small housing associations across the whole of the East Midlands run by volunteers. And if there's one thing we can do to provide affordable homes, and we're talking market rents here of below £100 a week, which is significant in a high-cost area such as mine. So what I would say to you, Madam Mayor, is we should be highlighting those good case scenarios, allowing trust to develop in such a way, and then provide affordable homes that everybody, I'm sure, around this room wishes to provide. Thank you.
Thank you. Barry.
Thank you, Claire. Yeah, there's a couple of points in there just to pick up on those in detail. Do we have any influence in planning over content? I think where there's an existing planning consent, absolutely not. I think that when that's been determined by the local authority, there's not a great deal that I can do to influence the retrospective view on that decision. I think for those, and most of these schemes indeed have a planning consent, so our ability is somewhat limited. Where a scheme has yet to receive a consent, then we've probably got more influence as a consultee in that process, an informal one, albeit. I think the point that was made with liaisons with local authority, Councillor Peacock, absolutely, over that particular site we've had extensive liaison with the planning team there over various aspects of that scheme, and will continue to do so. The key deliverability for these schemes will need the consent and support of our partners, and we'll continue to work with them to help deliver that. And I think the final point that Councillor Spencer was making is a really important one, which is how do we best respond as a combined authority to the needs of disadvantaged groups that have perhaps not been served particularly well by the existing structure. members will also recall that the Mayor's commitment to a homelessness task force, and many of these issues were absolutely front and centre of the discussions we had in the task force about how EMCCA might respond to the needs of those groups that are not particularly well served. And I think the linkage to the inclusive growth plan and how we can serve people and the linkages between health outcomes, education outcomes and housing are absolutely manifest. I think our best opportunity to do that is probably through our regional spatial housing strategy, where we can be absolutely in control of our own destiny there as part of that process. And I think I look forward to chatting with colleagues further on how we might best serve that through that strategy as we evolve that piece of work.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I therefore ask you to approve the recommendations in relation to the paper? You'll see those set out. You're happy to approve those? Yep. Yes. Great, thank you very much. We move now on to the Mayoral Community Development Fund and ask Michael to present the paper.
Thank you. I think in the interest of time I won't go through all the proposals that hopefully are clearly set out in the executive summary. I think there's probably just one introductory point that I wanted to reinforce. Board members will hopefully hear shortly from the Chair of the Inclusive Growth Commission about the emerging findings and the interim report that's due in a week or so's time. And it's very clear from that early work of the Inclusive Growth Commission, building on wider research, that a lack of social capital is a key and significant barrier to EMCCA's overriding mission to deliver inclusive growth. And to make inclusive growth a reality, then part of that has to be around making sure our communities are equipped to play an active role in both shaping and seizing future growth opportunities. It's that lack of capacity that can often limit the ability of those areas to benefit from growth, to access other funding, to recruit volunteers, to take on assets, to shape or deliver services, and to meaningfully engage with other programmes, however well intended. And it's within that context that the proposals are set out for the board's consideration. The report asks the board to consider those proposals, to approve an overall allocation of funding, and recognising that there is still some detailed work to do to shape the details of the delivery mechanism and the selection of areas to delegate that to officers in consultation with the Mayor. That further work will continue to be undertaken in collaboration with partners as all the work has to get to this point. I'll leave it there if that's okay, Mayor.
Thank you very much. The board will be aware that this is one of my specific manifesto commitments to establish a mayoral community development fund, and yes, you are reminding me, Councillor Radulovic. You no doubt by the looks of it carry that around with you everywhere. I'm touched and honoured.
Tick, tick, tick.
And no doubt holding me to account as well for delivering. You are my conscience. You and many others, may I say. But I believe that this is a really exciting opportunity for us to make significant change in our communities, those that are the most deprived communities. And I think we all know across our areas that we have some significant numbers of those. And indeed, referring back to our economic case, the local growth plan, we see the data that describes that, but we know that it's real lives, and I think this could really help to change that. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you. Yes, I'm absolutely fine with this. I think it's actually quite a good thing, and in the way it was described by Michael as well, and what it aims to do in our communities. I think this is more a plea than more than anything else. We've all, as local authorities around this room, had similar sorts of grant-giving schemes in the past to local communities, to organisations that deliver all sorts of things on the ground, working with volunteers and doing great things as well. And because of the contraction of funding we've had as local authorities over a number of years, we've had to pull back from doing a lot of that kind of work. Now, in the process of doing that, and I think all local authorities in the room will have found this as well, was that we were probably giving grants to organisations for a number of years without actually sort of drilling down into what it was they do. So it's very easy to do and fall into that trap. So I guess the plea would be from me is to ensure that we've got a really robust outcomes framework that we're working against for this, and that we have regular reviews of any ongoing sort of commitments that we may make as an organisation, and that and we challenge that on a regular basis. That way we don't fall into that trap in the future, and I think that would strengthen the purpose around the fund. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. I think that's a fair point, particularly the way in which we've tried to design this to avoid this being simply another pot that is grant applications. And I know that mayors in other parts of the country do have something which is small grant allocations, but I want this to be significant in the change in which it makes. And I think if we're going to make it significant, we have to invest in those communities in a way that's different, and a way in which we're able to monitor the changes that derive from it. And that's why I think that we are potentially going to do something quite significantly different from the usual grant giving approach. Councillor Peacock and then Councillor Swan, I think, yes.
Okay, mate, just a quick note from me, just to section 2.1 on page 176. It's about identifying where funding will be made, and we'll talk about each constituent local authority will recommend the shortest to areas for investment. My concern around that is that non-constituent members probably work at a close level to their local communities. They're certainly involved with an awful lot of work in there, and I think that they non-constituent member authorities would probably understand the areas of greatest need and understand also the measures needed to make the biggest effect in those areas. So I'm conscious, or I'm worried or anxious that the non-constituent constituent members may not be involved in the process, and I think they should be involved in the process of identifying those areas and identifying the kinds of projects which will have the greatest benefit in those areas.
I would absolutely understand that, and I would encourage those constituent councils to work with their districts and boroughs to surface the ideas in the areas where that investment would make the most impact. Councillor Swan?
Yeah, I really welcome this. For somebody who's worked in the voluntary sector for over, probably longer than I want to say, but certainly over 20 years, and as a current CEO for the credit union sector across the UK, these sorts of investments are an absolute priority. But some of the things that I do see is around sustainability and skill development. So it isn't all about giving the money, it is about, you know, somebody talked about how do we measure those outcomes. So those outcomes are sometimes very difficult to measure, and people don't necessarily fit into a box, which we talked about when we talked about NEAT here today. So I think when we think about how we measure those outcomes, it needs to be broad in its context, and it isn't just about numbers of people. So I really welcome this particular paper, and I think that it is an extremely good and strategic move for the combined authority. So I just want to say thank you for that from the sector and sitting here today.
Thank you. Okay, Michael, did you want to pick up on any of those points?
Just to reinforce a response to Councillor Peacock, absolutely the intent would be that constituent authority partners liaise with their districts and boroughs in bringing that to us. However, we don't want to turn it into a bidding process, so it's finding a way of making sure we capture exactly that intelligence you've talked about without it becoming another bidding type programme.
Okay, thank you. Are you happy to approve the recommendations around Community Development Fund? Yeah, great. Yeah. Thank you very much. We are now moving on to the annual pay policy statement and invite Amanda to present the report.
Thank you, Mayor, and good afternoon, everybody. The request is the annual pay policy statement is approved and ready for publication within this financial year as statutorily required. The report sets out EMCCA's pay policy in relation to the remuneration of its employees in accordance with Section 38 of the Localism Act 2011. The Act particularly requires us to publish details including pay policy and information related to its chief officers and lowest paid employees. It is to be produced annually and following board approval published by the end of March. Included in the report is the current median hourly rate, its pay multiple, which is the highest paid against the median hourly rate, and expresses a multiplier of pay, the chief executive salary compared to that of the lowest full-time equivalent earner. Happy to take any questions or comments. Thank you, Chair.
Questions, comments?
I thought there were telephone numbers.
Well, I don't think you'll be unfamiliar with these pay scales, even with the local authorities, Councillor Radulovic. Really? Okay. No comments, questions. Can I ask you to approve the recommendation on the resolve that the annual pay policy statement is approved for publication within the financial year? Thank you. Great. On to the calendar of meetings. Jodie.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Board. So the purpose of this report is to consider and approve the calendar of meetings for the CCA for 25-26 in order to ensure board committees and advisory boards have timetabled activity to come together as and when required. I would highlight that not all the dates in the calendar in Appendix A are necessarily for formal meetings. They are timetabled opportunities for each governance form to decide how they wish to use them. I will therefore submit the paper to the board and happy to answer any questions.
Any comments or questions? Yes, Councillor Smith.
I probably should know the answer to this, but can you just give clarity that you've worked with all councils on why you're putting this together? Because I know there's been some clashes over the recent times, which has meant some meetings haven't been able to go ahead or some representation hasn't been made at those. So just some reassurance that that's been done.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So that is actually the reason why we've taken the decision to come to board early from conversations with our 4 constituent authorities, so that you can then use our dates in the process of setting your calendars. All constituents were engaged to give us draft dates so we could take those into account. Due to where each constituent was in the process, only Nottingham City were at a point where they could share a full list of dates, but we have taken those fully on board and we have engaged all the democratic services teams in the constituents who will now take these dates on board in setting their calendars.
Super, thank you.
Great. Happy to consider and approve this. Happy to do that. Yeah, thank you. On to associate membership.
The purpose of this report is to seek board approval for delegated authority for the final appointment of the VCSE associate member. Be provided to the Mayor in consultation with the 4 constituent council leaders. This is due to unprecedented amount of interest in the role, which has slightly delayed the recruitment timetable. We're also seeking board to approve alignment of the terms of office of all associate roles, so that they would all run until June 2026, at which point board would obviously naturally review the position in regard to associate appointments to this board. Happy to take any questions.
No questions? Are you happy to approve that recommendation to delegate that final appointment process? Yes, happy. Thank you very much.
Alignment of terms of office. And aligning terms of office.
And aligning of terms of office. Yes, happy. Great. No one's objecting here. Thank you very much. Recommendations from committee.
So the report before you highlights recommendations from EMCCA committees for consideration at this board. When this paper was sent out, the Transport and Digital Connectivity Committee and the Skills and Employment Committee had not yet met. They have now met, and there are some amendments to that list. So going through, recommendation A remains as is. Recommendation B, the second bullet point, was not recommended by the committee, so that is not part of your consideration. And recommendation C is not put for you either, as the Skills and Employment Committee was incorrect when it met and is therefore unable to make a recommendation to you on membership. So you're being asked to confirm recommendation A, recommendation B, first bullet point, and recommendation D. Happy to answer any questions.
Comments, questions? If not, happy to approve those. Yes, thank you very much. forward plan.
So the forward plan is obviously a standard item on the agenda for you to simply note.
Thank you. Then we'll move on to Executive Director recruitment and inviting Amy to lead.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Clare. Hello again, everybody. So the EMCCA constitution requires that the appointments panel be formed to recruit for chief officer posts. So this is the chief executive, 3 executive director and monitoring officer, just for reference. This report confirms that a robust recruitment and selection process has been followed in regard to the 3 executive recruitment posts. I'm just actually going to pause there if I could and just wait for 2 seconds. Thank you.
So you just go keep them on the officer.
Yes, so for 3 executive director posts following a robust process, just before I mention the names of the 3 persons, I would like to extend a massive personal thank you to a number of people in this room who have taken part in very robust process, be that the stakeholder and many supporting panels as well as the final appointments panel. It was a considerable process because we were recruiting to 3 executive directors at one time, so thank you very much to everybody who's been involved in supporting us there. I'm very pleased to say that we had made offers to 3 candidates and that no issues or objections were raised with regard to the process as is required under our constitution. And the 3 candidates, just for reference, are Damien Dacey as the Executive Director of Strategy and Inclusive Growth, Edward Highfield as the Executive Director of Place, and Richard Williams as the Executive Director of Resources and Statutory 73 Officer. I will get used to not saying Section 1.1 Officer really soon. So I think that concludes everything I need to know on the report. I would just like to again extend a massive personal thank you to Nick Bell for his support to me in the interim role since I've become the Chief Executive, and to Amanda Mays and the team for running a very extensive process. I think that's probably all I need to say on this one.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Happy to approve and note that. Yes, thank you. And perhaps you can let Damien come back. Fine. So that concludes, I think in pretty record time actually, our agenda for today. You have managed to successfully spend a lot of money and make some significant progress. So please go away feeling very positive and in a good mood from that. The next meeting is scheduled for June. That will be our annual meeting. And we will see who will be sitting around the table. But I really want to thank all of you for your participation and for your support in making progress on so many agenda items today. For those who are members of the appointments panel, please now move to the room behind me, Rally Room 2. And for those who are not, please take lunch out in the middle here. And then on the rise of the appointments panel, the rest of us will all come back in then and have our presentation from the RSA. And the completion of that, I told you it's a busy day, you'll be invited to join the tour of the University Zero Carbon Innovation Centre. Thank you. Yeah, it's not bad.
It's a lot of money spent.
Not yet.